So I'm kind of expecting a bottom in the cycle in April. That's the teeth of the recession. I think we're just going to go off a cliff now, but I think the market has priced this. It kind of knows the recession. I mean, everybody knows there's a recession.
Yep.
I mean, there's literally not a person in the world doesn't know that right now. So the question is okay, if liquidity does change, how does this play out? And I looked at previous times, and it depends. I mean, is a probability that is not small that ETH actually gets unruly to the upside in a way that people don't expect, because we are all expecting some sort of consolidation. We're all expecting, but if you get that moment in time where retail's piling in, there's activity going on as DeFi comes back in new forms, NFTs get going, and we've got reduced supply because of the staking, and we've got the burn. I mean, we could set ourselves up to something this.
We haven't seen many interviews and updates on Ethereum lately because it's still correlated to Bitcoin. If BTC keeps consolidating or declining, many investors lose interest in the crypto markets, including altcoins. Yet, due to how it works, some others still believe that Ethereum will have its place with the smart contracts, NFTs, and DeFi, and that it has a chance to be way more profitable for investors than Bitcoin. Raoul Pal, founder of the Raoul Vision Group and an expert everyone lessons when crypto is the subject, tends to believe that the bear market is finally ending and we're moving into the crypto spring, and that in less than 30 days, we're seeing some huge moves happening. So pay close attention until the end, as this interview is full of value.
Yeah, so I've got obviously using a similar framework with liquidity, and my forward-looking stuff there suggests that it's fully turned. So, everything from the China credit stuff to the kind of global macro investor financial conditions index turned really sharp. So I'm kind of expecting a bottom in the cycle in April. That's the teeth of the recession. I think we're just going to go off a cliff now, but I think the market has priced this. It kind of knows the recession. I mean, everybody knows there's a recession.
Yep.
I mean, there's literally not a person in the world doesn't know that right now. So the question is okay, if liquidity does change, how does this play out? And I looked at previous times, and it depends. I mean, ETH is very closely following Bitcoin 2013. If that's the case now, then we could get a bigger spike and then a correction. If we're tracking the 2018, it's similar. I mean, it went up 283%. And then spent 6 months coming down. Now, if I look back and remembered what was happening so 2018, when it all took off, was the Powell pivot. He's like, okay, we stopped raising rates. People confuse it and thinking they cut rates. They didn't cut rates until August, and then they stopped QT in September.
Mm-hmm.
But up until about June, crypto rallied like crazy, and then it then corrected as the Fed started delivering on rate cuts. So it's kind of buy the rumor, sell the fact bit, and then started getting traction later. So somewhere in that is, this two halves idea I kind of agree with. And so what was different about the 2013 example is it did a sideways range. It put this big flag pattern and then broke out again, while 2019 was that quite a big correction, taking back quite a lot of the move, and then crypto ended up the year up 100%. I don't know which way it plays out, but what's going on in my head is, okay, fine, we've got these two examples. That's not a lot to go by, but we've got a rough idea what we think it could do. But then I think about the market itself right now, and everybody is underweight. 18% of the entire market's in stables. Every hedge fund is gun shy. Retail are a bit like this. And we know the institutions did all of the work on allocation, stuff like that. And it feels that everybody's short the upside, because the more it goes up, the more that they think, fuck, I need to pull the trigger. Now, maybe that gets the excess optimism, or maybe it is so bullish because, again, if I think about the ETH burn, if we're burning stuff in a small rally from the low, imagine when participants actually really come back. I mean, we're going to end up with a lot of people wanting to buy ETH and less ETH every day coming onto the market. I just think, okay, it might be different this time. What that means, I don't know.
Why is Raoul Pal so excited about the upcoming Ethereum news?
The other thing I'm thinking through, and you've looked at this too, is this Shanghai fork. Right? I know I don't stake because I don't want the illiquidity for a year, and I don't want to use Lido or anything, or Rocket Pool or whatever, because A, it's complicated, and B, there's another risk that I can't quantify. But if I can do easy, straightforward ETH staking at any time horizon, which is what the Shanghai fork is, I'm going to stake my ETH. And I think that's going to take gigantic amounts of ETH out of the market. Neither of us know anything here. We're just trying to figure out the probabilities. There is a probability that is not small that that ETH actually gets unruly to the upside in a way that people don't expect. Because we are all expecting some sort of consolidation. We're all expecting, but if you get that moment in time where retail's piling in, there's activity going on as DeFi comes back in new forms, NFTs get going, and we've got reduced supply because of the staking, and we've got the burn, I mean, we could set ourselves up to something, this kind of tremendous crypto bubble. There's a possibility of that, I think.
What about other layer 2 tokens? Something to look after.
Look, it's not a straightforward year because I can see lots of different outcomes. Let's talk about some of the other tokens, protocols at a broad level. What's interesting to you? Mine, it's not the most liked by some people, and other people love it, is Solana. The reason, my simple thesis on Solana, I'm very simple in these things, is like they clearly wanted to go and adopt the 100, the next 100 million, 500 million, a billion people, because they're consumer facing. They've got fucking stores. They've got a phone. They kind of get that side of things. And I just look at the chart, and it's so similar to ETH in 2018, 19, with this exact same drawdown. The price pattern's the same. Everyone's giving it up for dust. It's like, okay, that's interesting to me. Any view on Solana? They're doing great stuff. And, Polygon as a layer 2 accrues some of the value to the layer 1. I don't even know yet if we know how to value the layer 2s yet, but either way, Polygon is doing really, really well as well. It's kind of, for me, it's that Polygon Solana nexus. Feels like if somebody's going to crack, maybe Flow, there's other ones around, but if anybody's going to crack scale, it's that. The other one that's really interesting to me is Sui, Miston Labs.
Yeah.
Because that is hugely fast and an amazing team and that kind of stuff. So that comes out, and that feels like it might be the Solana of this cycle.
Yeah.
Who knows?
We've
could
got
be instead, or Arbitrum, or whatever. There's a few of these to come, really big ones.
What are Raoul Pal's ideas to get involved with and get the most out of the crypto growth expected as the adoption increases?
What is worth getting involved in? But how I've thought about it as well, I think we talked about this in the past, is that if you invest in an ETH NFT, let's say, you get the ETH exposure. So if ETH goes from wherever we are today, 1,700, and it goes to 3,400, your NFT might move around a little bit versus ETH, but generally speaking, you get that ETH appreciation. Now, if you get it right, so, one of the reasons that I bought a Punk recently was the fact that, okay, they're about as cheap as they've been, and they're like stable at 65 ETH right now. They're like high-end property. So as the market goes up, they tend to outperform because people want to show off and they want to invest their ETH and they want to buy these things. So they tend to be a call option on the bull market. I still get the ETH exposure, but if I'm right and Punk's triple, which would go back to the high, then I get the ETH exposure tripled. And people don't understand this, which is why some of those grails, some of those art ones are potentially really good investments, because what's the downside of a Punk in ETH terms? 30%? What's the upside? 300%? That's a 10 for 1 on an asset that's already going up potentially 10 for 1 as well. That's really interesting to me. And then if you can degen and find these projects, as you said, you've seen 6529's meme cards have gone from virtually nothing to 2 ETH. It's like, oh my God, these 10x's.
Now we have a controversial idea. If you have been following Raoul Pal for a while as an investor, he has a different perspective from Michael Saylor, Max Keiser, or other Bitcoin maximalists. Raoul sold most of his Bitcoin and created a basket of options that included some altcoins and ETHs to ensure he could profit from these markets. Today, he says that Bitcoin may have lost its narrative, and he explains why in detail.
I think it's interesting because both of us are really focused on this kind of mass consumer adoption part. That's where I think the next phase is. You heard it from the CEO of Microsoft saying it will have its AI moment at some point. What is it going to be? Well, we'll come on to DeFi in a sec, but the financial system is slow to adopt it. They're testing it, but at scale, to get the NASDAQ to adopt it for securities and stuff like that takes a long time. So it feels that retail brands and that part is where the next really big phase is. I think you agree with that as well. That's probably where, because for this whole space to grow, we have to go from 300 million users to 1 billion users this time around or more. And that's going to come from something else that is at scale. And we've seen, you and I have been involved with this stuff like Ticketmaster that I've talked about a lot. And, we're seeing people use this. We've just seen California talk about putting car registration documents on Tezos. It's like, okay, that's kind of interesting as well. Two things. One, I forgot to ask this before, is I feel like Bitcoin's lost its narrative. Yeah, and if we think about how things are valued in terms of Metcalfe's law, and this is valuation, not the philosophy of Bitcoin, you need the number of people using the network and the connections, and there's no connections on Bitcoin. Yes, we got the Lightning layer that batches transactions, but there's nothing else being built on it in the same way. So by definition, it can't do as well. The other thing is that if you're an asset allocator, and given the choice of ETH versus Bitcoin and the green narrative stuff, you're always going to take ETH because it yields.
Yep.
You get a 5% real yield after supply, and you've got the access. You're betting on the technology being adopted. Why would you not? So yeah, I just feel like Bitcoin's floundering, and it's actually getting narrower in its focus. And it's somebody was joking, I can't remember who it was joking, you now need to only eat meat, only take cold showers in the morning, you have to be this austere, you only read Seneca every day to fixate, or Marcus Aurelius to fixate on how terrible life should be. You should be wearing a hair shirt, you never spend any money, you just stack sats. And it's like that's not a very big audience. The network protectors have generally won out in Bitcoin's case all the time. So the people who don't want change have generally won out. And again, maybe in the long game that works, but in the next phase, I just don't see it working as well. I just don't think it's going to attract your uncle to invest in Bitcoin next time around. He'll end up probably buying or getting an NFT which is attached to ETH without even knowing about that he's got ETH exposure. It's going to be very interesting. The other thing that I think we've skirted around is, you said something very interesting that I think is dead right, is you usually get an innovation bubble, then you get all the failures and stuff doesn't work, but out of that comes the learning and the next phase. And I feel that DeFi, given what happened to the centralized exchanges, and listening to Joey Krug at Pantera, who's like, this is the big theme for us, I think it makes sense. I don't even know where or what. Sure, you can own Uniswap and Aave or whatever. DXDY is another one that people are looking at. But it feels that there's a lot of innovation to come out of DeFi because people have been building, resolving issues, figuring out what goes wrong, what goes right. Thoughts?
Do you think Raoul Pal is right, that April will be the end of the cycle and we finally hit the bottom? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to see more curated content like this, please leave a like and subscribe. Thanks.